Okay, good morning. Get that off the screen. Warm welcome to the Humanist Community in Silicon Valley Sunday Forum, to those joining us on Zoom, and to those joining us on Facebook. My name is Alex Havasey. I'm Vice President of the Humanist Community. The Humanist Community is a chapter of the American Humanist Association. Humanism is a secular, reality-based philosophy of life that affirms our ability and responsibility to lead ethical lives of personal fulfillment that aspire to the greater good. We value freedom, health, happiness, fairness, compassion, and using science and reason to acquire and apply knowledge. If these words describe your thinking, we invite you to become a member of the Humanist Community if you have not done so already. Membership forms are available on our website at humanist.org. That's humanistplural.org. A special welcome to those who are with us for the first time. We invite you to continue listening to our weekly forums and other events. You can find all our events listed on the website at humanist.org. Please aid us in continuing to present these forums by donating to the Humanist Community. And you can find out how to donate to our organization on our website. Again, that's www.humanist.org. Carl, would you like to introduce our speaker?
Yes, thank you, Alex. So this morning, we're going to discuss the challenges we face in California and what we are doing to prepare should the Supreme Court vote to overturn Roe versus Wade, and what you can do to join the fight to defend reproductive freedom. Dianna serves as the Director of Public Affairs for Planned Parenthood Mar Monte. Her career is focused on equity and civic engagement, leading her to develop the political program for a local labor council for a renowned search firm in San Diego and live in Washington, D.C., working for 2 California congressmen. Dianna serves on numerous boards that focus on diversity, equity, healthcare, and women's rights. Dianna earned a bachelor's degree in international relations from the University of Southern California and a master's degree in global leadership with certification in project management from the University of San Diego. Okay, Dianna.
Thank you for inviting me to be part of your conversation today. I'm going to do a screen share so you can see the presentation I have. So give me one moment here. Can folks see that okay?
Yes.
Yes. Okay, perfect. So as Carl said, my name is Dianna, and I am the Director of Public Affairs for Planned Parenthood Mar Monte. We are the largest affiliate in the entire country. And so being in California, primarily based, we also have health centers in Nevada. But like I said, being the largest affiliate in California and also spilling into Nevada, this is obviously an issue that is really going to be impacting us. And so I appreciate the opportunity to be able to discuss what is happening and what's going on with Roe versus Wade. And is my cursor not working to get to the next slide? It is not. Let's see. Give me a second here. Sorry, I don't. Well, it worked when we tried it out a few minutes ago, and now it's not.
Hold down the Alt key and press Tab.
Okay, let's try that. Alt key, thank you, and press. Oh, something happened. No. Oh, nope. That's.
There's always a good old fashioned, yeah, just come in and come back out again.
I might have to try that.
Yeah.
All right. Let's see. Maybe if let's try this again. Okay. So it looks like folks can see that. Okay. Well,
You've muted yourself.
excellent. This is going swimmingly. Let me try one other thing here. Maybe if I get, see it works.
Did you shut down PowerPoint altogether?
Yeah, that's exactly what I'm doing. I'm trying to maybe restart on that part to see if, since I had already done the screen share, if it sort of messed it up. Okay. So this, even like this, I can't do it.
What about pressing page down?
Page down, page up, page down. Nope, it has something to
No?
do when I screen share for whatever reason. It stops. Okay, well, it's a lovely presentation that I'm happy to send to folks so you can see it. So what I will do is I will just use it as a point of reference for speaking. I apologize for that. I don't know why it's not pulling up. That's unfortunate. So I guess moving in, the thing I'd like to start with is talking about the current political landscape and sort of what we see going on right now. So as we know, sort of the two really big items that we're faced with right now are SB 8, which is the current law that's in effect in Texas, and then Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, which is the main law the Supreme Court is going to be hearing and is set to actually have a result in come the summertime is sort of what we're expecting. So just a quick refresher on what SB 8 is, because I think this is really telling of the unfortunate direction that a lot of states are going. So first and foremost, it essentially is a 6-week ban on abortion. It deputizes private citizens as basically bounty hunters. So private citizens are the folks that are charged with enforcing the law, which is a very different take on how laws are normally enforced, right? And by doing so, Texas have actually created a space in which it's much more difficult for providers to be able to actually sue anyone or to be able to fight the law. There are no exceptions for rape or incest in the Texas ban. And additionally, it gives folks that are successful in suing someone who aids another person who's trying to get an abortion, it awards them $10,000 for every successful lawsuit. And that means that any human that has nothing to do with the person that's seeking care can sue family members, they can sue the Uber driver, they can sue a friend, anyone that in any way, shape, or form helps this person access care is open to a lawsuit. So that really creates a very dangerous space for people. And it really allows private citizens that should have no say whatsoever in a person's right to access healthcare to be able to actually really harm financially and otherwise providers and also people who care about assisting, like I mentioned, a family member who gives money, an Uber driver, a taxi driver, et cetera. We have some studies that have shown that since the ban took place in Texas, abortions have gone down 60% in Texas, but in the surrounding states, they've gone up 800%. So what that means is that the need and the desire for that type of service has not gone down. Folks are just having to move into other places. The other issue that I discussed was the Dobbs versus Jackson Women's Health Organization, and that is a Mississippi 15-week ban, and that is what is up at the Supreme Court right now. And so, like I said earlier, we are anticipating that they will effectively overturn Roe versus Wade once that happens, and that will be via this Dobbs versus Jackson's Women's Health Organization ruling. And so the other thing I think that's really important for us to touch base on is what's happening right now as a result of the Supreme Court's inaction. So generally speaking, if a law, as we know, is in place, state laws don't supersede that. And they have to be on pause until they go through whatever lawsuits and whatever legal battles are required. The Supreme Court didn't do that this round. And so as a result of that, states aren't waiting for the Supreme Court to actually tighten abortion laws. They're actually taking matters into their own hands. So a couple of examples of what that looks like, which I think is just important to know so that it paints a clear picture of what states are willing to do. Florida also now has a 15-week ban, which will serve, and all of these bans, I should say, kind of serve as triggers, right? They're trigger bans. So if Roe v. Wade is overturned, all of these states now have these other bans in place that will immediately go into effect. So as I mentioned, one example is Florida, who now also has a 15-week ban. In Oklahoma, a state committee approved a ban starting 30 days after the probable start of a person's last monthly period, which basically, if we know anything about anatomy, means that they have effectively banned abortions. Idaho has a similar law to that we see in Texas, except here it allows a compensation of $20,000 instead of just the $10,000 to any family members who sue, including, and this is the quote, siblings of the preborn child. So this actually incentivizes family members to sue one another for financial gain. Places like Missouri and Tennessee have what we call cascading bans. So they've put in bans at 6 weeks, 8 weeks, 12 weeks, 15 weeks, 23 weeks, so that if the Supreme Court comes back and says, you know, we'll stop it at 15, or no matter what time frame the Supreme Court gives, they have a ban in place so that they can also make sure to limit that. So they've actually taken a stance where they're just going to cover all of it so that they can be as restrictive as possible. And so those are just a couple of examples, I think, of some stuff that's important to mention that states are doing. And then, as I'm sure you heard, in the federal government, the Women's Health Protection Act failed in the US Senate. And the point of that bill was to try to stop the abortions from becoming unavailable should Roe v. Wade be overturned. But that did not make it out of the Senate. So right now, this is all really providing a catalyst for states that are not supportive of reproductive rights to continue to limit as much as they can in anticipation of Roe v. Wade being overturned. So I have a really great map that, oh, actually this, I can at least share this screen with you so you can get a visual. So this I can do. And it's a map that really gives you, I think, a picture of what will happen when Roe v. Wade is overturned. So if folks can see this, unfortunately, I can make it a little bit bigger here. But this gives a snapshot of what is going to happen. So anywhere that it's pink means that it's protected. Access to abortion, access to reproductive rights is protected. This is a map of the areas in which there are these trigger bans that I was talking about. And just in these last weeks, when some of these states have instituted more trigger bans, there's actually more states now that would have dots on them that would also be posed to ban abortion should Roe v. Wade be overturned. So here you can see that there is a massive sort of desert that, should this law be overturned, folks don't have a lot of options as where they can go. And anyone that is in a gray state is going to have to most likely travel to a pink state. And for some people, that is an extremely, not just a long travel, but it also has a lot of financial implications for folks, right? That means they have to take time off of work. That means they have to travel. They might have to find childcare. They have to get a hotel. They have to find food to eat. And a lot of these families don't have those additional resources to be able to do that. So it really does make it extremely difficult for folks to be able to access care. Sorry, I'm trying to, all right. So I also wanted to touch base a little bit on the reasons why we are continuing to fight, and how we oftentimes, I think, we're very fortunate to live in California, where many laws, not just reproductive rights, but many other laws are enshrined, and there's these rights that we are very accustomed to having and that we don't really think twice about. But as an affiliate that does cover a wide array of Californians and a very large, diverse group of Californians within that, I just want to share a little bit about other things that we are facing as as Planned Parenthood. So one example I want to give specifically for California. So our region covers down to the Bakersfield area, all through Central California. We go all the way up to San Mateo County. We have the entire coast. We also go over to Sacramento, San Joaquin County, and all of that. So while those of us that live, in the central area, so more, let's say like, Santa Clara County, we're fortunate, we have a lot of elected officials that are very much in support of reproductive rights. However, in other areas closer to Central California, like Kern County, that is not the case. And this is all part of the California that we represent. But just most recently in Visalia, we were looking to expand healthcare. It was a top priority, very much needed. And just last week, we actually lost the healthcare center that we had spent years and years working towards. And the reason was some people in the community did not want a Planned Parenthood in a public kind of easy location where folks could easily see it, which is important for us, right? We want to have health clinics that are easily available and accessible to our patients. And so they, after many, many hours and many conversations, not just with elected officials, but also community members, going to city council meetings, countless nights and hours, we lost the center. And so that is just an example of why we have to, and this was just this week, right? So this is not something that's happening 5-10 years ago. So we are now, we are still committed to finding a health center in that region. And we were able to really motivate a lot of the folks in that community, because what we were hearing was we need access to these services, all of the services that Planned Parenthood provides, which range from primary care on. But the folks that were elected to city council felt differently, and they don't represent the voices of everyone. And so it was a loss, and it was something that we were obviously very disappointed in, but it just created a resolve that we need to continue this fight. And I share that story because I think sometimes we forget that while California, does have the Future of Abortion Council, while we do have a governor that is supportive, while we are making strides in ensuring that our folks are safe and that we can provide services, not everyone that lives in California lives in an area that has that same support system. So I share that just as an example of why we need to keep fighting. The other thing that I will share is, as I mentioned earlier, we do also have health centers in Reno. And Nevada is a very interesting place because a lot of the laws that are now in place in Nevada that will ensure access to reproductive health care were actually done in a bipartisan manner. So it was women, primarily women from both sides of the aisle, that came together to ensure that the Freedom of Choice Act were passed. And so I think that it's important for folks to also remember that this should not be a political issue, right? This is an issue about healthcare, and healthcare is a human right, and being able to access your human right to healthcare. So just wanted to share those as some examples of how it can work, but then also how even within California, we really do need to continue to be vigilant and fight. So as it's been alluded to, both sides, folks that are against reproductive services and folks that are in favor of making sure that everyone has access to reproductive care, are all working under the assumption that Roe v. Wade will be overturned. We heard the arguments from the Supreme Court, we heard the questions the justices asked, and it very much lends itself to the idea that that Roe will fall. So we are proactively working as an organization and as an affiliate to ensure that we can best manage the expectations of providing services, not just for Californians, but also for anyone that is going to have to come in and request our services. So to that end, we are working on expanding health center locations and sizes so that we can accommodate the influx of folks that we anticipate to have. We are increasing laboratory capacity. Again, as I mentioned, we provide a large array of services, and the larger our laboratory capacity, the more people we can serve and more effectively and efficiently serve them. In addition, we are also investing in training providers. We are going to need more healthcare providers once folks from other states start coming in. We've already seen an increase in patients, and we expect that to continue and obviously grow once Roe is overturned, which means we really need to make sure that we are staffed up and that we have all of the healthcare providers in place, trained, ready to provide services that are needed. We are also thinking and working about, around creative ways of supporting our out-of-state patients. As I mentioned earlier, there is an additional cost for anyone that comes out of state because there is the travel component, the taking time off of work component, et cetera. So we're working on thinking of and being creative on how we continue to help those that are going to come from us from out of state. And then we're always, thinking about what are some other pieces of legislation, what are things that we can do to try to ensure that that we protect what we have and that we grow what we have as well. So we are actively working on a number of things to make sure that while we know that the amount of work that we're going to get is going to increase dramatically, but that we're as best prepared and best equipped to deal with that influx of folks as possible. So oftentimes, we are asked what it is that that people can do to help and to support, and we recognize that support and help comes in a variety of ways. So I'm also happy to email Carl all of this information so he can get it out to folks. But I do have some suggestions on things that people can do. So the simplest one of the things that people can do is when you go to our website, which is ppmarmonte.org, there are two big options there. One is to donate locally. Obviously, funds of any kind are always appreciated and always helpful. We recognize that perhaps that isn't feasible for everyone. And so there's also a lot of volunteer opportunities. You can subscribe to our newsletter, which comes out, I want to say, about once a month, and just really talks about the different volunteer opportunities that we have coming up and lets you know what's going on. You can also view the current volunteer opportunities kind of in real time, and you can also share your story. One of the things that we have found is there's a lot of stigma, as we know, around receiving and looking for abortion services. Everyone's story is different. Everyone's interaction is different. And so one of the things that we have found is sharing those stories helps break down that stigma. And it can be a personal story. It can be a story, if you know someone that has a story. It can also just be a story about an interaction that you had with Planned Parenthood that maybe doesn't have anything to do with abortion, but really putting a face and sharing the different experiences that we all have, we have found to be very important and very telling. So those are a couple of ways that are just sort of on the website that folks can get involved in. We also have really good social media where a lot of real-time stuff happens. So if social media is something that you enjoy, we have a Facebook page, an Instagram, a Twitter, and a YouTube. And so those are always just sort of easy things to follow so you can see what's happening in real time and up to date. I also wanted to share that we have a list of vetted funds where folks can donate to that are not to Planned Parenthood, but are to abortion funds. And some of them are in Texas, some of them are in New Mexico. We have some that work specifically with folks that have are seeking services 16 plus weeks. We have suggestions here for organizations that work specifically with Black women. And so again, happy to share these vetted abortion funds with folks if that's a place that you would also like to look. And then, and I will share this screen, I also just wanted to share some upcoming events that we have. Right now, everything that we are doing is still virtual. We very much are making sure that everyone stays healthy. So I wanted to share some of the events that we have coming up. Again, these are all things that I can get out to folks so that So if there is interest, people can join us for any of these. So we will be having a Planned Parenthood Mar Monte 101 training that just kind of helps give you a lay of the land. As I mentioned, we provide a wide range of services. We now provide gender affirming care in all 35 of our health centers, which is new. And we're adding additional services as often as we possibly can. So if you're interested in joining those, everything here is obviously free of cost. Everything is virtual. So we can get you the information for that. We are also having a Voices Speaks Volumes of public testimony training. One of the things that we've recognized is as we continue to talk to elected officials, as we try to share the story of what we're doing and what we need. Helping folks craft impactful public testimony is really beneficial. Oftentimes people can be a little bit shy or they're not really sure what to say. So we just thought it would be helpful to provide some training so that people can actually tap into that if that's something that they see that they'd like to do. And then finally, we are having our Capitol Week, which is going to be the week of April 18th. And these are basically our lobby visits where we go and we talk to the elected officials in Sacramento about the bills and the issues that are most important to us. Again, that will be done virtually. And so if that's something that folks would like to do, they are also willing, we also welcome them. Oh, are you kidding? It just worked on the last slide. I just pressed a button and it switched slides. So this is my contact information. Should folks have any questions, want any more information about anything, I'm always here, always available, happy to help. And so, like I said, here's my email, and Carl also has other contact information of mine that I'm happy for him to share should anything come up. So that is a sort of kind of overview of what's happening right now. As I mentioned, we are still we're still fighting. We have definitely had some setbacks, but especially being in California, where we very much prioritize reproductive health care, ensuring that we can continue to serve our patients and serve the patients that will come in from out of state. Is a top priority, and we are doing everything within our power to make sure that we are proactively prepared for when that day does come.
Thank you. I had a question.
Sure.
It's about the ban in Texas and the idea that any citizen can sue over this. Generally, you go to court, you have to show that you're affected by it. You have to have, otherwise you don't have standing. Those rules don't seem to apply here.
They do not. You're correct. The bill was written in such a way that it took the entire responsibility of enforcing the bill away from the bodies that normally do and put it solely in the hands of private citizens. So that is absolutely one of the massive issues, is that it doesn't actually have to impact you whatsoever. And to make your original claim against someone, you also don't necessarily need to have proof, right? Because how would you? And so that is one of the things that is most dangerous about this, that it really does deputize any citizen to put a claim in, and then it's incumbent, and it falls on the driver, it falls on the healthcare provider, it falls on the family member that helped, falls on them to try to prove that it is either that it wasn't within the time frame, or whatever the case may be. But you're right. Normally you do have to prove how it affects you. In this case, you don't.
Very strange.
It is, and that's been one of the things that's been so difficult about fighting this law, is that how do the healthcare providers, normally what they would do, right, is like you put the lawsuit in and then you sue the district attorney, or you sue the attorney general, right? Like there's usually like an entity that you sue to help stop and litigate. How do you preemptively sue random citizens that you don't know who they're going to be yet to try to stop this law? You can't. And therein lies one of the massive problems, is that it doesn't allow the healthcare providers to be able to sort of proactively stop these things from happening.
Any chance of countersuing?
So actually, just on Friday, the Texas State Court said that because the licensing agencies were not the ones that were involved in enforcing, they cannot be sued. And so they're just on Friday this happened. So it basically renders any counter lawsuit ineffective as of right now. It's a very new way of stopping people from accessing their rights. And we're watching it unfold in a very scary manner.
I was also wondering, I know sometime back I don't know what the status of that is now. But I think a lot of medical colleges offer courses on how to provide an abortion.
Mhm.
And I think some of them require it, but I'm not sure how that's affected by the quote freedom of religion laws, and that a person can opt out of something because they feel it violates their religion. Does that affect medical students?
Oh,
and specifically in California?
I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not sure, but I can find out for you. I don't want to take a stab at it and then be incorrect. But I'm unsure, but I will definitely ask about that.
Okay, I see their hands up. I've been ignoring that. George.
Follow-on question about these SB 8 vigilante suits. Does the person who gives aid and is sued have to be someone resident in Texas or the state in which the suit is in which the laws, or if the assistance is provided by someone in California to someone in Texas, can that person be sued in Texas court?
So I'm not entirely sure about that. I think even if you're a California resident, let's say, and if you're physically in Texas and then provide something, I think in that instance you can. They were working, last I heard, they were still trying to figure out, like, if we provide assistance, right? Like you're saying, like physically from being in California, if they can still sue you. And I'm not sure about that. Because there was question around that, because again, it's the very first time that a law like this is happening. And these mechanisms are new to everybody. But I will double check on that.
And just as a follow-up, I mean, something that maybe should be done is to have the state of California provide assistance to women in other states to come to California. So that, that's maybe something that should be done.
Right. And I know the governor had the Future of Abortion, the FAB Council, and they were coming out with a variety of suggestions as well as through these conversations to, I think, very much like you said, try to figure out what California itself as a state can be doing to ensure that we are providing that assistance, and then figuring out what that assistance looks like based on what the need will be. Because I think some of the issue as well is a timing issue, because the bans have created such a small amount of time in which someone can access that care. Oftentimes they may actually have to be leaving Texas in this instance to be able to access that care, because they've already hit the threshold of the time when it's legally allowed. But yeah, that's a great suggestion.
Carl.
Yeah, I wanted to ask a question. I guess I had three questions, but maybe I shouldn't dominate too much. Let's see what happens. So the first question is, doesn't the bill allow for a civil suit, not a legal suit, right?
Correct. Yes.
So what are the damages they would get was $10,000. So what they're trying to do is stop suits by making them too expensive for people to defend. Is that correct? Okay,
yeah, that is.
But couldn't a bunch of people get together and defend the suit for the person?
They could, sure. And I think though that one of the strategies is, if you sue the same provider multiple times as an individual, most of us don't have multiple $10,000 and legal fees to be paying out, because also if a suit is successful, it's a $10,000 award to the person, and they have to pay, they get their legal fees paid. And so a part of it as well is trying to financially cripple be it the healthcare provider or whoever is in support of helping that person.
Well, but if you have a PAC doing it and had billion, could get millions of dollars, it could be. Anyway, so that's one strategy. I didn't hear anybody talking about it. And then there was I had another question. So I said counter sue bills. I forgot what that one was. I have a famous habit of doing that. Then there was the other one where you were denied access to a particular facility. In which city was it in California?
Visalia.
Okay, so Visalia, but you said only on the main street. You could put it somewhere else.
That was one of the arguments that they had. It's actually not a legal argument, but it was, we have health centers there, but we're looking to, like I said, expand. And so there were a lot of the concerns, if you will, that the folks brought up were, it's in too public of a place. That's not sort of what we want in this specific area. So more than anything, it was what I'll call excuses, right? To not come out and say the real reason why, but just sort of attempting to find a variety of other reasons to say that it was not, that they did not want it in that particular area.
But you could put a facility somewhere else. A new one.
Yes, absolutely. Okay. And so that is still our commitment to that community. As I mentioned, the community was, very much organized around the desire and to have the health services provided there because of the need. And so we are absolutely committed to going back to the drawing board and finding a new spot. Mm-hmm. But it takes time. And in that time that, in all the time that the time and energy that we put into this facility was very much needed. And now we have to start again. And so the downfall of that is that we're not able to continue to provide, or not able to expand the services as quickly as we would have liked. But the commitment does not end.
Can I write something? Yeah. Sorry. Zim, I see your hand up.
Yeah, thank you for the good talk. It's frightening. I mean, these laws are just absolutely barbaric. But I want to ask a question about something that underlies this, I think. Many people on the right believe, some of them probably sincerely, that life begins at conception. Mm-hmm. How do you counter that narrative?
That is a great question. And I think that sometimes it's a great question. It's also a very difficult question to answer, because some of those beliefs are very much rooted in how people identify themselves and who they are oftentimes, right? And I think that from my perspective personally, I don't necessarily seek to change your opinion of that, right? But what I do implore is that you think about how your actions impact somebody else. So you may not agree, and the universal you, somebody may not agree that folks should have access to these services, but we also only have our own lived experiences to draw from. We don't understand what it's like to have lived in the shoes of someone else. Everyone's story, as I mentioned earlier, is different. And so to have a law in place that has no exception for rape or incest is so troubling and so horrifying, because it completely, and that's an extreme sort of example, right? But the fact that there is no human thought, no kindness towards what that person has already experienced, and should that result in an unwanted pregnancy, what that person might have to experience for the duration of their lives, right? And so for me, I think the biggest thing is, we everyone needs to be allowed and has the right to make whatever decisions are best for them based on whatever their personal circumstances may be. And somebody might not agree with them. We all have family members and friends who make decisions and you say, I would have done that very differently. That applies here as well. And so I think for me, it's people using blanket statements. It's people having these preconceived notions of, oh, any person that gets an abortion must be this type of person. That's completely inaccurate, right? And so I struggle with the fact that that people can be so, as you kind of mentioned, like barbaric and horrific to each other, that I will make a rule. I don't know you. I know nothing about your life, but I will make these blanket rules that can have life-changing impacts on you. And I don't care. And that to me, I think is really at the core, and honestly, when you look at the makeup of a lot of these states in which these laws are being passed, oftentimes the folks that are most vocal are men. And I also think that that's problematic because they don't share that lived experience. Of course, there are also women that, that stand and have those stances as well. So I don't want to solely point the finger, at men, but, but these folks are making decisions for everyone when, to your point, it doesn't impact them, or they've come from a place of privilege or a place of luck, or things worked out for them in a way that we wish would work out well for everyone. But that isn't always the case. And so that to me, I think is really the central point, is not so much wanting to change your fundamental opinion as it is having you really understand that the human thing to do for another, if you truly care about humans and humanity, is to allow people to make the decisions that are best for them based on their lived experience and based on what goals they have for their lives.
So, you're making a libertarian argument, essentially, and I 100% agree with you. You're preaching to the choir, but
Right.
I'm still thinking about, the pro-life people. If you believe that abortion is murder, then you definitely have the right to legislate it. We can have a situation in which, personally, I'm against murder, but you can kill people. Because it's you're making on this,
right.
That's unacceptable, right? So there is this sort of intellectual barrier there.
And I think there's also like the viability question, right? So like right now, like Roe v. Wade is really about viability, right? Until it is viable outside of the body, like it's like that's how they've made the distinction. But no, I do understand it fundamentally, and I when you put it sort of like in those terms, like, yeah, it makes perfect sense. But at the end of the day, I don't think that we're going to be able to really change the minds of those more extreme folks, who are also, though, the folks that sometimes are willing to cause bodily harm to other people, who are willing to intimidate, willing to bully others, who are willing to physically harm other people seeking services, right? So there's a bit of a hypocrisy, I would say, within that, of course. But ultimately, you're right. I don't think we change their minds. So our job is at that point to also legislate and protect what we can as best as we can. Because I think, they're not open to having conversations because they have this very specific belief. And I do understand that it is not something that they're going to easily let go of. But we've seen polls, and roughly 2/3 of Americans polled think that Roe v. Wade should remain in place. So generally speaking, the American population is in favor of reproductive rights. So I guess if we think about that third, they're very vocal. They hold a lot of power in certain states based on being elected. And they have managed to really position themselves as if they were the voice for all when they are the voice for few.
Maybe we need to split this country in two. Well, thank you so much for your answers.
Yeah, no, you're welcome. It's a good one and it's a tough one. Yeah.
I think I was called on.
Yes, you were.
Okay. So this whole thing, it seems like a new sort of legal framework, legal attack on abortion rights. And I think like the Texas law, did it end up surviving? Did it go to the Supreme Court? Did it survive?
It is in place. It's actively happening. The Supreme Court did not vote to pause it while it was going through litigation. So it is since September 1st of last year, it is law of the Texas land.
Okay. So a state like California could turn around and do something using the same precedent where they're basically making vigilantes, by allowing people to sue directly. They could do something like allow anybody to sue providers of fossil fuels and have everybody go after them and basically solve climate change that way, right? I mean,
we've seen that at the moment, the enforcement mechanism is new, and it's, at least in Texas, that's what's making it so hard to fight. So if it continues forward, that looks like it could be a new enforcement mechanism that is available.
Yeah, it seems like it's a way to get around federal laws.
That's exactly right.
And you may not be the best one to ask, but do you know of any other states like trying to use that same workaround to do other things, even if it's in protest of this original law? Not
for anything else other than same type laws.
Yeah.
Okay. So there are other states doing what I'll consider like kind of copycat type laws because they see the success the Texas law is having. So it's also setting up a very terrifying precedent for what other states recognize that they're going to be able to do.
Right. Yeah. And then finally, I'd just like to say I am coming from Florida, and I know we have a terrible governor, and I'm sorry, but
we don't blame you.
Long enough to vote. So that's all I got.
Thank you so much.
Okay, Carl.
Okay, sorry, I had myself muted. Yeah, I just had another question. It's sort of along the same lines of what Matt was just talking about. And that is that the California governor and a few of the dominant people in our Congress have suggested several laws that they would do along the lines of what Matt was talking about. I can't remember what they are now, but I think there were 3 or 4 of them. And have you followed them at all? And do you know anything about what's happening there?
I don't with those ones, no.
Yeah, because it seemed like that's sort of a negating strategy or whatever, which you could get behind and help fight anyway, you could help fight that as well. They have to go to the Supreme Court, of course, if they're going to allow this stuff. I'm sorry, that's enough for me.
Okay, I got a couple questions here. But first of all, I wanted to ask if you could send us your slides.
I will.
Online.
They're beautiful. I was so upset. And I'm sorry that you didn't have a chance to see them. It's so much easier to visually see things. So yes, I will absolutely send them over your way.
Well, so I wanted to comment that Gavin Newsom has talked about enacting a similar law to curb the use of guns. And a citizen can sue a gun manufacturer or salesman or whatever. But I've got another question here, which is that since in many cases there's no provision for age of a pregnant individual, can this be considered a form of child abuse if she's forced to conceive to bear a child at the risk of both physical and mental health?
Well, I think it depends on the state that you live in, unfortunately, which should not be the answer. But I feel that, like I mentioned, specifically like in Texas, right, with no exceptions for rape or incest, folks can go through that from starting at a very early age, and there's already the trauma there. So the only provision it does have is sort of like for a medical emergency, but there's no real definition around what that, what that might be. So, I would say, and I think that, if you look at it from a Planned Parenthood perspective, not allowing someone to access the care that they need, especially after having gone through something as traumatic, as having is being pregnant at not only a young age, but especially if it's a result of, rape or incest. I do think that could be viewed as an abuse of that person, right? Like their mental and physical and emotional and spiritual well-being. But no, it's not. Depending on how the laws are written, and depending on what state you live in, unfortunately.
Okay, Dana or Jerry?
Yeah, so you said that 2/3 of the people support reproductive rights, which means that the state legislatures that are voting these laws are going against national opinion. But I was wondering whether or not they actually go against the opinions in their own states. Has anybody done polls on a state-by-state basis?
I'm not sure if there are state-by-state polls. That is a good question. I'm not certain if there are. I mean, we do know that just based on sort of who is getting elected, some of those states are more conservative in nature based on the folks that they're putting into office. But I mean, there are also some states that, that we've seen that the races are really close, right? And but if you lose the race, it kind of doesn't matter how close it was. So I think in some of the areas, they're going with what their more conservative base is wanting them to do. But overall, it is not the national opinion. But I will double check if there are state by state demographics on that.
Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, don't see any other hands. I did have a comment I wanted to make. That is yeah, I was going to comment that I've heard an objection to restrictions on abortion as relating to bodily integrity. That is, if I happen to be in a hospital and there's a dying child and I'm the only one available who can provide a blood transfusion, I can't be compelled to do that. And it seems to me that that's in sharp contrast to the attitude towards abortions.
Yeah, I think, unfortunately, this is a topic that has become very politicized and very polarizing. And folks view this with a different lens, I think, than some other issues, and oftentimes we have seen that the same people that say that we should not have bodily autonomy are very willing, though, to say, but I don't want the government in my home. I want to make all my own decisions, right? It's un-American to have the government tell me what to do, yet they stand in line to ensure that other folks don't have access to those same rights. And it becomes much more situational because of their viewpoint.
Yeah, I think it's related to the idea that as a woman, this is your function in life, to bear a child.
I mean, that's definitely, I think, a part of it, and this does nothing to help when we talk about issues of, equality or equity or inclusion, diversity, right? Like all of the things now that we often say that we are fighting for and that we know are important for our society, restricting one group of people's rights to access care that is a fundamental right really stands in contrast to all of that other stuff that generally speaking as a country we say we are in favor of, and that makes us great.
Carl, I see you got your hand up again. And you're muted.
Carl, you're muted.
Yeah, I know. I hear you. Don't worry.
Okay.
I wanted to share screen. Can I do that? I just wanted to answer some of the question that, oh, it says host disabled participant screen sharing. Can you fix that, Greg? Let's see. Still disabled. I guess you can. I was going to show you, I found a map. Of which states favor or against by state, the Pew Research Center. Someone was asking that question, and I was going to show a picture of it if I could share my screen. Ah, there it is. Okay, where is it here? Oh my, can't find it here. Okay, let me just share my full screen here, and then, oh, I see. It wasn't. Could everybody see that?
Yes.
So it says, majority say it should be legal, the blue ones. The majority that say it should be legal or illegal are the green ones. And the orange ones are illegal, just to give you an idea. And most of the illegal states seem to be a lot of the ones that are passing these laws too, whatever that means. Anyway, I'll stop sharing now.
That map actually very much mirrors the map that I showed, where the pink was on the outside, right? Because those were the states that in which abortion is protected. So I think that closely mirrors exactly what you showed.
Zem, I see your hand back up.
Yeah, one thing that strikes me about people on the right is their utter hypocrisy, because people who are pro-life, of course, defend the restrictions on abortion, but then once the child is born, they couldn't care less about it. They're against childhood education, childcare, the child tax credit, right? They are not pro-life, they're pro-fetus, and is that a counter narrative or talking point that you think we could use?
I do think that highlighting that is helpful because they, as you mentioned, right, a lot of like the social services and a lot of the things that help folks progress and that can be safety nets. And even things like you said, like, childhood education, that's not a safety net. That should just be like a basic right that everyone has access to, right? But yeah, there's a lot of fundamental building blocks that help a human be successful. And when you stop caring, as soon as the human starts needing those building blocks, that really creates a vicious cycle of people not being able to get out of certain situations, depending on their, what the family structure might be. And so, I do think that is a level of hypocrisy to say, no, must keep no matter what. But then as soon as it's time to feed or clothe or educate or any of the above, it's like, well, no, that's on you now. Oftentimes, if folks are seeking abortion, it may be because they know that they can't financially or emotionally or mentally or whatever the case is, right? And so then if a decision is made for the person that they must continue with the pregnancy and have the child, all of those barriers that existed are still there. And they don't have the support system that they need to be able to be successful. And that is, you're just continuing to place somebody in an unfair position where they have very limited resources, and should be up to the decision of the individual, not of someone else who it doesn't impact at all.
I forgot to mention prenatal and natal care, which is like, if you really care about this child that's about to be born, well, you should, provide resources for that child, even if it's unborn, right? And it seems these people don't care.
Which is why I think a lot of why it's important also for folks to know that like we do provide all of those services at Planned Parenthood, right? We do the prenatal, we do the postnatal, we do primary care. We have patients that are in their 80s and 90s. Like we run the gamut of everything because it's whole person care. We care about the entire person at every stage of their lives. It is not helpful to only care for a microcosm of a second about a person and then not provide any other services that they may need throughout the course of their lives.
Okay, Dana or Jerry?
Yeah, thanks, Carl, for showing that map. One thing I thought was kind of interesting about that map is that Texas is not one of those states that says it should be illegal. The other thing I wanted to say was that, you know, I've done clinic defense in San Jose and, you know, see these protesters against abortion say they're willing to help the women who want an abortion. And it turns out, what is their help? Provide bus fare to go to a abortion, what's the term? For a different place that would basically advise against abortion. And that was the extent of their help.
A crisis pregnancy clinic.
You know, just at that time, it was like $2 to go to someplace else in San Jose, and that was it. I'm done.
Dana, you had more to say, I think.
Yeah.
Or Helen, rather.
Yeah. I think they're called crisis pregnancy clinics that pretend to provide services. The thing that Zem was saying, I agree with. I may have offered this before when we discussed abortion and anti-abortion positions, but there was a nun, Sister Chittister, who said these people who claim to be pro-life are just pro-birth. They don't care what happens to the child after it's born. None of the services, et cetera, or even as Jim mentioned, the prenatal and post immediately natal services, just so the child is born. And I was really annoyed from what I heard about Justice Amy Coney Barrett, who has I don't know how many children, and it's like, oh, it's more important for the children to be born. Doesn't care, you know, that they just don't think it matters, you know, that you could just go have the baby and give it up for adoption. No, if you've been raped or victim of incest, which is often rape as well, you don't want to go through the psychological burden of bringing a child to term, which is why women throw themselves downstairs to get rid of it. Just adoption is not an option.
Well, you know, and I think I appreciate that you brought up the adoption point because it isn't a viable option for everyone, right? Like that's also a very personal decision because you still have to go through the entire process. And it, you know, again, without knowing, you know, what the family makeup is and what happened in your life, like you might not have the luxury of those 9 months, right? To go through that if you even, you know, want to consider adoption an option. So I appreciate you bringing up the fact that that's not the easy button and
Right.
that's not the solution.
Right. And there are so many women also who started out a pregnancy healthy and wanting it, and then something comes up, and then it's either the child is not going to be viable or it's going to endanger the mother's health. Correct. And the anti-abortion people don't care about that either. Okay, I've had my say. I'll go mute.
No, and I will just say, you know, I also thanks for highlighting that because as I kind of mentioned, like everyone has a different story, and you're right. Some of those stories are people that wanted to have a family and it didn't work out, and so it's a different, you know, they're coming at it from a different place. Their life experience is different, but they get lumped in to whatever talking point the anti-choice people are saying in that moment.
Carl, you had your hand up. Carl?
Sorry, yeah, okay. I was going to make a comment. I happen to know one person who is strongly anti-abortion. And it's a woman, she, and she says that women should be responsible, should be responsible for having had sex to get the child. And it's interesting to talk to her about rape and incest, right? But other than that, she says that they should be bring their child to term, and they should have them adopted, because there are lots of people who want to adopt children. They should force that on them. But I just want to point out that in this particular woman's experience of her life, she actually got pregnant out of wedlock and had the child. I just, it just gives you an idea of some of the framing that some people go with. That used to be the case. She's a Catholic, so.
Okay, Paul?
I just wanted to comment. I think as a nation, we are a majority in favor of choice. And I think we would do better simply to focus on that and do the political work to elect people who will support that. Arguing with someone to change their minds, to come to agree with you on something, oh, and by the way, you're a hypocrite, is just not going to get us anywhere. And well, I'll just let that statement stand. I just had a general question about I live about a half a block from your new facility in Mountain View at Showers in California. Beautiful facility there, and really nice people that work there that I talk to as they come and go. But I just wondered about the financial health of the Planned Parenthood in this area, and sort of a general status of your condition, what your needs are.
Sure.
Are there more specific ways that other individuals who are supportive might be useful and helpful?
Great. Thank you for that question. On Wednesday, I believe, of last week, Valley Medical Center opened a specialty care clinic right next to ours. So it's in the same building.
Right.
So it's the first time that the county and Planned Parenthood have come together to have services in the same location. So it was very exciting partnership. They have cardiology right now, and then they're going to have pulmonary and endocrinology. But the other really fun point there is they have a pharmacy that is open to everybody. So all the patients can go. So really, again, sort of looking at like that whole person care, where we can do primary care on our side. And then if there's any specialty care they need, they just walk literally one door over. And they can get any medications they need or any other services. So that's an exciting venture for us and to pair with Valley Medical Center. And then I think that brings me to your question about sort of like how we're doing. We are doing well, thankfully. I think, our CEO is very astute and has been working to ensure that that we are in a place that we can continue to expand facilities, continue to expand services, really continue to invest to ensure that we can provide what we need. We also, like I just mentioned, have these great working relationships and partnerships with the county, which really help in terms of continuing to grow our footprint and making sure that we're serving everyone. So we're good. We can always use more, right? Just because the battles don't stop. But we're in a good spot. And that I say that now, and then like I said, as time comes and we continue to serve more patients and all of that continues to grow, obviously there's the constant reassessment to sort of make sure that we stay where we need to be so that we can be around for as long as folks need us. So forever.
just a follow-up, are there other places in the country where there's a Planned Parenthood organization that you have some information about that really needs another check or so?
Yeah, let me, so I know that there are some, I think there's the one in Texas, I believe is still operating. So that might be a spot. And then there are a couple of other ones in other states. I think there's one in Tennessee. And I believe they're one of only 2 providers, and they're trying to pass a law in Tennessee that says that they would have to cremate anything that comes from an abortion individually. So for after every single patient, which would cost thousands upon thousands of dollars, and would effectively kind of not allow them to provide that service anymore. And I believe it was the Planned Parenthood in Tennessee, if memory serves me correctly.
That's bizarre.
It's all of the interesting tactics to try to stop at all costs, right? Like the more outlandish,
Yeah.
apparently the better.
Yeah.
Like it's kind of, it's ludicrous.
Yeah. I grew up in Tennessee. I'm not entirely surprised.
Yeah. Well, we're happy to have you in Mountain View.
You didn't get a chance to show the slide. You had a slide for suggestions about what we could do. I wanted to put that on.
Yeah,
So
actually
it's
now that,
available for the people who watch the video.
yes, of course. And now that it's actually,
Now
let's
that's
try
working.
this. Now that it seems to be working, let me see if it will go back to, no. Let's see, will it? Oh, okay, great. Now it decided to work. So now you can see that it was lovely and it was done.
Yeah, I was thinking before after we were talking about attitudes towards abortion, I'm kind of reminded of, I forget the exact quote, but it was President Teddy Roosevelt who commented that he couldn't respect a woman who didn't want to give birth to a child any more than he could respect a man who wouldn't serve in the military. That's another one of those your station in life kind of thing.
That is certainly a bold opinion.
Yeah, I suspect that the latter half is not widely respected by.
Agreed. So this is the website, our website. And as I mentioned, there are a few things you can look at, but the 2 I would point out are the donate locally and the volunteer locally. And within that, you can subscribe to our e-newsletter. And that will tell you everything coming up. And as I mentioned, everything we're doing right now is still virtual. So that's one option. These are the social media handles as another option of just places to sort of get sort of in real-time information. And then this was the other slide, which again, I'll send this information over, but these are the vetted funds that I had mentioned. And you can see here, some of them work and sort of kind of specialize working with certain populations. And so that is another option. And these have all been vetted by Planned Parenthood Federation of America.
Yeah, you might put that in the chat box if it's easy to do.
Yeah, once
Maybe
I
someone
saw,
else can do it.
yeah, no, I think I can do it once I stop doing this screen share. I'm pretty sure I can.
Okay.
So I can get those to you. And then these were the upcoming events that I had mentioned, which I can also email over links. All of this is virtual as well.
Thank you.
Of course.
Dana and Jerry, did you want to get in here?
Yeah, so I guess Planned Parenthood still has facilities in Texas.
Yes, I believe there are 2 of them. I believe there are 2 of them.
And I assume that they are providing all the other services, but they don't do abortions anymore.
That was the last I had heard, is that, yeah, everything else is up and running. But they're actually obviously, because of the litigation, we're having to be very mindful and very careful about providing that particular service.
Well, that does remind me. I remember seeing an article a few weeks after the SB 8 was passed, and there was a doctor proclaiming that he was going to continue doing abortions in Texas, despite the law. Do you know what happened to him?
I don't. I would venture to say that he probably kept his word. If you're willing to publicly announce it, I think I would venture to say he kept his word, but I would also assume that just due to to sort of like the legal struggles around it and the amount of money that it could cost to be constantly litigating personally, I would imagine he is also just being very mindful of ensuring that he stays within the current law. But I don't know.
So what if a woman comes into one of these Planned Parenthood facilities in Texas and says, "I want an abortion"? Now they're going to be told, "No, you can't." What if she says, "Well, can you give me any advice?" Suppose a doctor said, "Well, yes, we can send you to a Planned Parenthood in California." Could that doctor get in trouble with the law?
I think that as long as it's simply providing, like, oh, if you go to our website, there are other locations that might be able to provide that service for you, then that's sort of just like passing information. It's not actively necessarily assisting. So I think in that instance, it would most likely be okay. But again, that would be, if there happens to be someone who is against reproductive rights in that space and overhears that, they could still try to use that as a catalyst to have, to start the proceedings against that person.
Yeah.
So it really just creates a there's no clear delineation, right? Like you had to have heard this or seen this or experienced this to bring a suit against someone. You can just see an Uber driver drop somebody off in front of a Planned Parenthood and say, I suspect that person helped aid a human in going to get an abortion, and start the process right then and there. And then it's incumbent upon the driver, right? I mean, at that point, it's like, I have no idea why I'm taking this person to this facility. That's not within my purview. My job is to get them from point A to point B, right? And so it creates a really scary space. And we'd heard stories about at midnight, the night before the law went into effect in Texas, that there were people outside in parking lots taking pictures of people's license plates to have them on hand should the law move forward, so that they could start making those calls and start suing.
So have there been any actual lawsuits in Texas because of this law?
I believe there have been, but I would have to get back to you on the details of like what those look like.
Okay.
The first one, I think, was from lawyers in Arkansas that filed a claim that sued somebody. I don't remember now who they were, but they were the first ones, from what I've read, that actually got into court.
Are there restrictions on the availability of abortion pills?
So that is one of the workarounds that healthcare providers, and I shouldn't even, it's not a workaround, but it's one of the tactics, I guess you could say, right, that providers had been looking to use, because as I'm sure you know, it was the FDA approved them being able to get that in the mail. And so what some states have started to do is they've started to attempt to block mailings of the pill. So putting state laws into place saying, no, you can't do that. Or saying that patients have to wait until their second or third visit to then come pick them up. So instead of just being able to readily access the medication when needed. And a part of that delay tactic is because then if you force someone to delay long enough, then they hit the threshold of when they can no longer access that service. So there are, I'm blanking on what state it was, but there was a state that that requires like a 72-hour, you have to see a provider, then you have to, it's a 72-hour waiting period. And they were trying to put in like a 30-day ban. So based on just how bodies work, that doesn't function in terms of being able to find out that you're pregnant, go in, talk to your provider, then wait 72 hours, then access care. At that point, you've already passed the 30-day threshold and you can no longer access services. So a lot of it too is saying, oh no, it's not illegal. You can still access it, but here are all of the hoops that you have to jump through. This is all the time you have to wait before you can actually get the service. And then by that time, it's like, oh, well, unfortunately now you're too late and we can no longer provide that service for you. And of course, the people that have to tell them are the people that are trying to provide the care for them.
Sounds Kafkaesque to me.
I was wondering also, since there are, no, I'm muted. No, I'm not muted. Yeah, since abortions are still being performed illegally, I wonder if there are sites where a person can, study the procedure to provide the least harmful method to people seeking a back alley abortion.
Right. I am not aware of any, but if those procedures were being done years and years and years ago when there was less technology readily available, I have no reason to believe that that wouldn't happen now, right? But the fact of the matter is that, those aren't scenarios we ever want to put somebody in. We want them to be able to come to a place where there are trained professionals with all of the tools and the sterilization and all the technology that they need to ensure that the patient is as safe as they can possibly be. And the thing that we know is that the more restrictive laws don't stop the abortions from happening. The number of people seeking them doesn't decrease. If they can't access it in a healthy way, in a place that is safe, in a place that is secure, they will seek it elsewhere. And then that is where we start having these problems where things aren't regulated. You don't know the training that provider may or may not have had. It's an additional, it's a cost to the patient. They're just very unsafe places to put patients in because there's no regulation behind it, right? And so the fact that someone feels forced to do that as their only means is not acceptable.
Okay, Carl?
Yeah, I just wanted to get a specific question answered. I don't know if you've looked into this or not, but when the person brings a civil lawsuit, they don't immediately get the money, right? They have to actually win the suit.
That's exactly right.
Yeah, so it turns out that the willy-nilly lawsuits would be somewhat limited because very few lawyers will take on a suit in advance. I'm just saying, so there is some people, you're acting as though all someone has to do is take a license plate of somebody and send it in, and they can't prove what that person had done at the Planned Parenthood, as an example.
Right.
So and hence they couldn't win a civil lawsuit. So it may be that maybe you're stretching it a little. I'm not in favor of the law. I'm just saying that there are some limitations, if you will, that are financial, because I don't think any state's going to give money to people. Not only that, they're going to probably make them sweat blood to get the money, especially if a lot of money starts going out that port.
Yeah, well, I mean, I think, and I'm sorry, I wasn't attempting to imply that it was like just quite that simple. But I do think that I think there's a couple of things. I think one is the providers, right? Because if it's a suit against the individual person, right? So let's say for a provider, since they're probably the easiest target, or a staff member. I mean, ultimately, if they were to win the lawsuit, but those $10,000 come from that individual person, right? So I think that's, $10,000 is a good motivator for people, whether their suit really has legs to stand on or not. I think another part of the problem as well is it just really empowers people to start spying on each other, right? And making assumptions about other people. And so it creates also a very unsafe place where if, for example, there are protesters oftentimes outside of these health centers, And so what is it, now they have an extra incentive to possibly catch someone, right? And so those laws also then become important in terms of how do we protect our patients and our staff so that they're not, possibly coming on to the property, because even if the sign says they can't, they very well still might. And then there are some centers, like just providers in general, that like on certain days of the week, that is what they do, right? I know I'm originally from San Diego. There are some places down there where that's the service. That's the only service they provide on a Saturday, let's say, right? And so it's very easy then for protesters and folks that are anti-reproductive rights just to go there and monitor, right? Like, okay, we know everyone that's coming here today is most likely seeking this one service. Let's start making these snap judgments about people. Let's start collecting their personal information, be it, license plate, even though you're not supposed to take pictures, but, they still, it's hard to stop someone from doing that. So there's also, I think, a lot of these other invasions of privacy that it incentivizes, which can really create a harmful cycle. And the other piece too, is that there are lawyers who are also not in favor of reproductive rights, and they might have no problem saying, yeah, we know a lot of these are frivolous, but if it means just creating problems for folks, then that's a worthwhile use of their time, in their opinion, So I think that there are some other sort of like additional layers to it that can really sort of make it, that continue to make it dangerous. But no, I appreciate the clarification on that.